All right, so the Torah portion is Miketz, which means at the end, and it's from Genesis 41 through chapter 44, verse 17, but we're only focusing on chapter 42 today. I want to kind of zoom in on Reuben.
Yeah.
He takes a really interesting part in this chapter, and he says some crazy stuff. And, you know, people... We usually think of Joseph as the star of the last part of Genesis. He's the main character in the story, and that's true. But Judah takes a really big second role where there's this contrast between Joseph and Judah as, you know, they're being tempted, they're living with foreigners. You know, one is kind of the savior of Israel, and the other one is giving up his life for his brothers. So there's all these connections between those two. But we don't really talk much about Reuben. But Reuben really does have a big role to play in this story. So if you go all the way back to the beginning of the story of Joseph, or of Jacob's sons, so Joseph is gone. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. Simeon, who is the second-born son, Reuben is the firstborn, Joseph is the 11th. Simeon is now gone at the end of this chapter. He's in prison in Egypt. And Benjamin is now threatened. So Jacob is like facing the possibility of losing 3 sons instead of just the one that he thought he had lost. And so then Reuben offers 2 of his own sons. Like, I'm going to go to Egypt and get Simeon, and I'm going to bring Benjamin back. And if I don't, then you can kill 2 of my sons, which is such a bizarre thing to say. Like, what in the world is he thinking? This has always puzzled me, but I think I finally have a handle on it this year. And there are several possibilities. You know, one, Reuben is guilt-ridden. He feels guilty about all the stupid stuff he's done in his life. And he's trying to, like, you know, I'm just going to lose he has 4 sons. So he's saying, I'm just going to cut off part of my own lineage to kind of pay for my own sins if I can't at least restore this son back. Another possibility is he's just an idiot. He assumes that his father hates him, and it's like, sure, just kill a couple more of my kids. If I can't bring back your sons, kill some of mine. I know you don't care about him anyways. So, or he's bitter. You know, he was the firstborn son, but, you know, he's been passed over as the favorite. Judah is really kind of running the family, and he may be bitter about all this, and he's boasting of his confidence, like saying, I'm going to go rescue this. I'm going to be the star of the day this time. And if I don't do it, you can kill my sons. Like, this is how confident he is that this is not going to happen. Like, no way. I'm coming back.
Bitterness?
Well, I think...
Or could it be that he's confident he can step up to the oldest role? And
well, I think he is confident. But I think the idea of killing his own sons, like, why would he even propose this if it's like, yeah, Dad, you care so much about these others. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to rescue the day. And if I don't kill my sons.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a combination of things. I mean, this is such a messed up family. They have done some really crazy stuff. So that's the summary of where we're at right now. So now I'm going to go back to the beginning of the story. And in Genesis 28, Reuben is the firstborn son. He is the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promise to Jacob. Let me pull this up so I can read these passages. Genesis 28, I'm going to verses 13 and 15. It's all part of the sound effects of the story. So, and behold, Yahweh stood above it and said, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. So God has promised Jacob that he's going to be the father of nations, just like his grandpa Abraham and his father Isaac. And this begins, the fulfillment of this promise begins when Reuben is born. This is his first son. It's like now he's on the way. So Reuben, we see him in Genesis 30, a couple of chapters later. He has kind of a strange role in the birth of Joseph. So Reuben is out in the field working, and he finds some mandrakes and he brings them back. And this is like a fertility enhancement thing. They think that, if mom eats the mandrakes or they feed them to dad, I'm not really sure how this is supposed to work. This is supposed to help them conceive a child. So Leah is like, yes, we've got some mandrakes. I'm going to have another child. Except Rachel comes along and says, give me your son's mandrakes. And Leah is also bitter. She's very angry about this whole switch thing. She was obviously complicit. She had to have a part in it, but she's not happy about being forced onto Jacob and, Rachel being the favorite. She's in a bad place. It's like, well, having sons is the way that she's trying to get her husband's favor. So she wants Rachel's place. Rachel is the younger one, and it has the favor of her husband. Leah is the older and is disfavored, which is this pattern that goes all through Scripture. Yeah. And Leah is... What's that? And through the family, apparently. Yeah, and Leah is trying to fix this by having more sons. Right. And so when Rachel says, give me your mandrakes, she's like, you've already taken my husband away, and now you're going to take away my son's mandrakes? And Reuben, bringing the mandrakes to his mother, is also trying to enhance his position in the family. Like, if mom has more sons, then, if my mom is more favored, I'm the firstborn. That means I'm more favored. Can you hand me that little microphone right there?
I'm really sorry.
That's all right. I'm just gonna turn this one off.
Yeah, this time it's probably not.
It's great. But having the microphone right next to him.
So I'm kind of wondering what that's going to Yeah. Really.
Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of like Reuben's fertility. It's his way of raising his status in the family. But now Rachel has taken that away from him. I mean, Leah gave it to her, after they bargained. But this was Reuben's idea. I mean, he's the one bringing it to his mother. He was trying to enhance his own status in the family by enhancing his mother's. But now Rachel's got it. It's like, this is counter to what he was trying to accomplish. And so Rachel has a child. Joseph is born. That's Rachel's firstborn. He becomes the father's favorite. And Reuben is kind of seeing the writing on the wall. All right. So Rachel has always been the favorite wife. Now Joseph is the favorite son. And Reuben, the firstborn, is probably feeling kind of left out. Like, everything that's supposed to be mine is just going away, and I didn't do anything to deserve this. And then in Genesis 35, starting in verse 22, it came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now there were 12 sons of Jacob. If Reuben is feeling cut off, like he was losing his place as the firstborn, there's this, this is another one of those things, like, what in the world is Reuben thinking? This is just crazy. There was a practice in the ancient Near East that if a new king deposed an old one, then the new king would take the old king's concubines and wives as their own. And so this was a way for the new king to say, everything that the old king had is now mine. And there's a good possibility, looking at parallels between the stories of Ham after the flood and the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot and his daughters, that this is the same thing that was happening there. That Ham, it was not his father himself that Ham sinned against, but his father's wife. So Leviticus says that you don't sleep with your father's wife because this is your father's nakedness. And so when it says that Ham saw his father's nakedness, it is probably talking about his wife in a roundabout kind of way. And this could have been an attempt to take authority over the entire earth at that time, since Noah was essentially king of the world. So the same thing is probably happening here, that Reuben, having seen himself displaced, and Joseph, who is a spoiled little brat, is apparently going to be the head of the family, and he's the 11th born son. Reuben is trying to fix this. I'm speculating a little bit, but there are a lot of clues in the text. Reuben is saying, Dad is making a bad mistake. I am the head of the family. I'm the firstborn son, and I'm going to show it to everybody. So he is deposing his father. That's what I think is happening in Genesis 35. Yeah, in the Testament of Reuben says that as a result of this, Jacob cursed him with like 7 months of some kind of wasting disease, but then healed him and forgave him, essentially restored him to the family. And you can see a hint in that, and that the very next sentence is, now there were 12 sons of Jacob. So Reuben did this thing that he should have been executed for. But instead of being executed, he's counted among the 12 sons of Jacob again. So evidently he was forgiven, at least nominally forgiven by his father. But he is never going to be the firstborn because he's an idiot. So by doing this, he was trying to take what he believed was his by right. But then we get to the story of Joseph, and Joseph is having these dreams where the sheaves bowing down to him, the stars and the sun and moon bowing down to him, and his brothers immediately see what this means. It's like, oh, so we're all supposed to bow down to you? I mean, they understand what the dream means. Apparently, dream interpretation runs in the family. It's not just Joseph. And so Reuben once again said, well, I tried to do this thing. It did not work. And now even God is saying that Joseph is going to be the head of the family, and we're all going to bow down to him. So I think that he came up with plan B. And plan B was, let's make nice with Joseph. And maybe when Joseph is in charge, I can be number 2, which is better than being kicked out or cut off from the family completely. Yeah, so a little bit further down in the chapter, Genesis 37, starting in verse 21, you have the story of Joseph's brothers selling him into slavery. And at the beginning of this story, Joseph goes out to check on the sons of the concubines. They're supposed to be out guarding the herds and the flocks. And he brings a bad report to his dad. So they're upset about it, and they're going to get revenge. So Joseph is out there again with them, and they grab him. They're trying to decide what to do with him. Reuben is not there. Reuben still sees himself as the head of the family, at least right now. And so he comes upon this scene, and he sees his brothers getting ready to kill his youngest brother, or younger brother. 37:21. But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, let us not take his life. Shed no blood, throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, but do not lay hands on him, so that later he could come back and rescue him and restore him to his father. And I think that by doing this, Reuben was hoping that, one, he gains points with his father. I rescued Joseph from those other kids. All your other sons, they are such troublemakers. I'm better than all them. And I know Joseph's your favorite, so here he is. And, when you put Joseph at the head of the family, remember me. And he's also making nice with Joseph. Joseph's going to remember that Reuben rescued him from being killed by his own brothers. But now that Joseph is in the pit, Reuben leaves again. It's like, okay, now how do I go back and rescue him? What's my next step? And while he's away, the other brothers decide to sell Joseph off into slavery. And Reuben comes back and he's like, what in the world have you people done? And in verse 29, going down to verse 29, Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, so he tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not here. As for me, where am I to go? So now he has not only not restored Joseph, but Joseph is gone, out of his reach. There's nothing he can do to rescue him. And it's like, he doesn't say, what am I supposed to do? He says, where am I to go? And I think that he is thinking, I was in charge out here. I was the one who convinced them to throw him in the pit. And they're going to tell dad this. And then I have already screwed up too many times. I'm done. So I've got to go find somewhere else to live. But where am I supposed to go? So plan B failed. In Genesis 42, the brothers all come to Egypt. And they don't know Joseph is even alive at this point. They probably assume that he's dead. But here he is, essentially ruling Egypt. And they don't recognize him. He recognizes them. And they're there to buy grain. And he pulls them aside and he starts questioning them. And they say, well, we're just 12 brothers, sons of the one man. And he says, no, you're here to spy out the nakedness of the land, which is a really kind of a strange phrase. It's using that same phrase, the nakedness of the father, is a euphemism for violating the father's wife. And he's accusing them of spying out the land so that they can come and raid Egypt and violate the land. And Reuben is hearing this and thinking, I've been here before. And he starts to connect these dots. And we get down to verse 22. And he says, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. So Reuben hears this phrase, you have come to spy out the nakedness of the land. Joseph says it twice. And he's like, my sins are now coming back to us. And we're going to pay for Joseph's blood because we sold him to Egypt. Well, they sold him down to Egypt anyways. Go down to verse 36 to 38. And we have another strange conversation with Reuben. Jacob, their father, said to them, now this is after they've come back from Egypt. Joseph has kept Simeon behind, saying, you have to bring me your youngest son to prove that you're telling me the truth. And if you do, I'll let them both go. And Jacob is like, no, you can't take Benjamin because he's the only son left of Rachel. And if I lose him, that's going to be terrible. In the ESV, this says, you have bereaved me of my children. And it kind of sounds like, yeah, they've bereaved him of two. Joseph is dead as far as Jacob is concerned. Simeon is now in prison in Egypt. So, but what it actually says is, you have made me childless. It doesn't say you bereaved me of my children as if it could be some children. It's like saying you have made me barren or childless. All of my children are gone. And there are several different ways to understand this. One, Joseph was his favorite. Once he loses Joseph, it's like all the rest of you don't count. I just love Joseph. I'm not really sure that's what he means, but it's possible. He's so heartbroken by the one loss. It's like, you might as well have made me childless. Another possibility is that he understood that God's plan for him meant that he had to have 12 sons for 12 tribes. That's nowhere stated in scripture, but the fact that after Reuben sinned that first time, and it immediately says, and there were 12 sons of Jacob, that could be an indication that Jacob recognized he can't cut Reuben off because then he wouldn't have 12 sons. So it's like, if I have lost one of my sons, God's plan is broken. So I might as well be childless because I can't fulfill God's promises now. Which I think that's a possible interpretation. Maybe Jacob just didn't understand that God's promises can't be broken. Oh, the other possibility is that one son is dead, another son is in prison, and it's all the fault of these other sons. So these two are gone, and these two, I'm done with them because they're just a bunch of screw-ups, and I don't even want them around anymore. So now I'm childless. I'm disowning you all. So those are three possible explanations. I kind of like the middle one best, but it doesn't say which one is correct or if there's some other explanation. I don't know. But Reuben's response to this is, well, I'm going to bring Benjamin back. So you can trust him to me. And if I don't bring him back, you can go ahead and kill 2 of my 4 sons, which, as we said earlier, that's just kind of crazy. But there's another possibility of what's going on here. Maybe this was plan C. that Reuben was actually making another play for the head of the family. Because what he says next, deliver him into my hands. The ESV says, put him in my hands, but it's the exact same wording as where it talks about, I think it's in Ezekiel too, where God says, I will deliver you into the hands of your enemies. And so was delivered into his hands. This always refers to somebody being defeated and put under the power of somebody else. So Reuben says, deliver Benjamin into my hands and I will bring him back to you. Reuben essentially is saying, put him under my authority. I know that you wanted Joseph and Benjamin is your next favorite, but put your favorite underneath my authority and I will keep him safe. I really think this is Reuben's final attempt to take over leadership of the family. And this time he's trying to buy it from his father. The first time he tried to take it. The next time he tried to do it through favors. You know, I rescued Joseph. I brought him back to your family, and these other sons of yours, they're a bunch of murderers. So I'm the one you should be putting in charge. I don't think that Reuben ever hated Joseph or Benjamin. He might have resented them at one time, but I don't think he hated them. He didn't want any harm to come to Joseph. He just wanted to be in charge. And Joseph was standing in the way. He didn't hate his own sons, the two that he offered to kill, at least not in the way that we think of as hate. He just valued his own position in life more than he valued his sons' lives. He wanted to be head of the family, and as long as he had at least one son left to take over after him, then that position would be secure if he could get it. So he tried to take power over the family by force, tried to make nice with Joseph, tried to buy it from his father, and then several generations later, more of his descendants tried the same thing. When Korah rebelled against Moses, and Korah was a Levite, and he said, you know, Moses, you and Aaron, you're doing a bad job of this. We're God's people. We're Levites. We're all prophets. I should be in charge. So Korah was trying to take over essentially rulership of all Israel, but all of his henchmen, Datan, Abiram, and On, these were Reubenites. Reuben was trying to connect with the leader of the rebellion to say, well, when Levi takes over, maybe I can be second in charge under this guy instead. So plan D. But because Korah was not God's chosen man, Korah, Datan, and Abiram all got swallowed up by the earth, which is exactly what they tried to do to Joseph. It's what they did do to Joseph. They put him in a pit, and then later he ended up in prison in Egypt. So the things that they tried to do to Joseph happened to them instead. And eventually Reuben did lose two of his sons, just not the sons that he thought. And the biggest problem that Reuben had, Jewish tradition said that his problem is lust. It wasn't lust for women. It was lust for power. He wanted to be in charge. He didn't care what it cost him. Didn't care what it cost to everybody else. He didn't wish everybody else ill. He didn't want to destroy anybody else. He just wanted to be the one in charge. And trying to take the role that God has not given is always going to lead to problems. And, you know, some people have great skills, great capabilities. Some people are great administrators, great leaders, great speakers, or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean they're supposed to be in charge. But so many people try to get into these positions based on their abilities as motivational speakers or their ability to play politics behind the scenes. But just because they are capable of certain things, they have certain qualities that people expect to be leaders. I guess King Saul is probably a better example. He had all of the qualities that everybody expected to see in a king, but he was not the one who was supposed to be king. David was. And if they had waited maybe another 10, 20 years, maybe God would have said, okay, y'all haven't asked for a king, but now it's time to put a king in place. And they would have gotten the right king the first time. So, you know, it's like, you know, what Paul says about being parts of the body. You know, if everybody can't be the heart, everybody can't be the hands, everybody has to play whatever part that God has given them. And when we try to take the part that God is not, we end up breaking the body and making it malfunction. But yeah, Reuben is one of those characters that's like, he does these crazy things that don't make any sense, except when you put them all together. And then it kind of starts painting this picture of Reuben's of a failure who keeps wanting to be a success and doing the wrong things to make it happen. Instead of just saying, God, what am I supposed to do? What role am I supposed to play in the family? Or maybe going to Dad and saying, Dad, what is my position in the family? I know I'm not qualified for what I want to be. So what should I be doing? And it's the same problem that Esau had.
I was going to say, Esau did ask his dad, what am I supposed to do?
Well, he didn't. He waited too late. At the beginning, he goes off and he finds his own brides and he marries Canaanites.
He did.
And Rebecca is like, if Jacob follows his footsteps, I'm going to die. These Canaanite women are killing me. And Esau hears this, and instead of going back to Rebecca and Isaac and saying, Mom and Dad, what am I supposed to do? How can I fix this? He goes off and he marries another wrong woman. So it seems like there's one in every generation, at least one. And the wise thing to do is go to Father and say, Father, what am I supposed to do? Point me in the right direction and I'll accept it. And we're really bad at that.
Yeah. Or we start to, again, in Reuben's case, it was, I'm the firstborn. I'm supposed to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a lot of ways, it could be that his idea of being a firstborn and his idea of what that was supposed to look like is really kind of the idol in a sense. And so he just keeps chasing that thing instead of realizing that, like, that thing has passed, that ship has sailed, that thing has passed. So what else can I do? Because and the assumption that he was living under was that's what he should be doing. Whereas the assumption should have been, once he realized he was passed over as the favorite and realized that his dad was going to give Joseph the leadership in the family, it should have been, well, I'm here, I must have a purpose, right? So this is the faith or the positive thought of like, well, if I'm still here, if I'm still part of the family, then I must have a role. And I think we all do this kind of thing in life where it's like, we'll pursue something, and just be like, it feels futile. And it's like we never ask the other question, which is like, well, if this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, then what is? Or whatever it is. It's like we'll take so long to give up on things sometimes because in our minds we see that like this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing or whatever. And then it just turns out that if we just stop for a moment and like ask, we might find out maybe that was a purpose for a time and maybe that's not the purpose now.
Yeah. And we have to be careful who we're asking too.
Yeah.
Because
asking the right question.
Yeah, Reuben was assuming that the world's way of doing things was the way it's supposed to be. And in general, the world isn't always wrong about everything.
Overlook that. Like, this is what we're all doing. This is the way of things. Like, I'm the firstborn, I'm by rights, I get this.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then not being able to, I didn't know, and it's cruddy to think that your father doesn't love you the same as he might love someone else. There's a lot of things going on, but you can't totally fault him for his thing. He does what most people would probably have done, especially when Joseph was a little brat.
Yeah.
But
So what else we have in chapter 42 to talk about?
Well, I thought it was really interesting. I didn't realize until we were reading it again. I never noticed this in terms of patterns. So it says when Jacob tells them to go buy grain, it says, so Joseph's brothers went down, 10 of them, to buy grain from Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob did not send, or he said an accident might happen to him. So the sons of Israel went down to buy grain among the others who were coming because the famine was great. And I realized like there was there's a connection to the 12 spies, 10 and 2. I never noticed that before. And what's interesting is Benjamin and Joseph in this are the two and they are the two favored, but they're not involved in, and Benjamin and Joseph are both obviously paralleled with the two spies that gave a good report. So it struck me as I you were reading it, I guess. It just all of a sudden jumped out at me, and I was like, well, this is interesting. This is an interesting parallel that I never noticed. But it also made me think about, like, it's Caleb and Joshua. And so it made me think about, like, okay, this is parallels with Caleb and Joshua, maybe also for Benjamin and Joseph, or maybe not. Maybe it's just the 10 and 2 thing, right? I don't know. I haven't really spent any time thinking through it, but I just thought that was interesting, especially when it's like they go down into Egypt and then they get accused of being spies. That's what really made me go there.
Yeah,
is that when they go down, Joseph accuses them of being spies, and
that was a good connection.
Yeah, and he goes through that whole thing of like saying, yeah, you are spies, like, you know. So it is interesting. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to let God shape us so that we can be the kind of people who can raise the kind of kids who can fulfill their purposes, while we're being the kind of people who can fulfill our purposes, and God perfects us in the process of doing that. And the cooperation that we have with God is doing that, and that He gets to shape us and mold us through that process and build in us the things that He wants to see in terms of the character of God. And it's almost like, it feels like that would be a relief, you know, if we really like had that focus every day. Because it's like, we talk about holiness and we talk about being like Jesus. We talk about all that, and it's like we're working toward that perfection, and we are.
Yeah.
But it's like sometimes I think we get caught in the worldly trap of thinking like, this is how you do it. You do all the things, and you demand the same standard for everybody, which is great. Yeah.
You know, living in that.
Yeah.
This is how the world works.
Exactly. And that's what I was thinking. That's
striving for
Reuben.
this.
Yeah. And it's like, that's what Reuben was kind of doing. But he was like missing the point that it was like his purpose could have been something else that he didn't really notice. He wasn't really paying attention to. So I just kind of wonder how much of this is a tale to help us to see that what God is asking of us is not about the perfection, but it's about the process and the purpose. You know, I mean, even Paul talks about. Is it Paul that talks about the potter and the clay and the shaping of, you know, the vessels for the purpose? It's like that's another example of that same kind of perspective.